Hi, this is Stephanie Miller from The Stephanie Miller Show. Please enjoy this exclusive clip from my show on Political Voices Network. I mean, this is something that really does transcend just law. I really did think of you as a father. And I keep saying, stop joking about Handmaid's Tale. We're there, right?
Yeah, this is about decency and humanity, and the fact that the Texas government, the Attorney General, would go to court and try to force a woman, Kate Cox, and I hope her name becomes a battle cry without intruding on her horrific personal circumstances. I hope everybody, every time they go to the polls, will remember what the Texas government tried to do to Kate Cox, somebody who desperately wanted a child, wanted a family, and yet the fetus had a condition called trisomy 18, which I've tried to read up on, that basically prevents, and I'm no doctor, but it seems to prevent the fetus from developing. So it is all but certain that the fetus wouldn't survive, even, up to the birth or after the birth. And yet the government decided that it would step in and make this decision, forcing a woman to carry what was almost certainly going to be a dead fetus to term. That is effing insanity. It's insanity. And I hope, first of all, I hope she gets some justice. It looks like the Texas courts will hold. We'll see.
Yeah.
But even more importantly, I hope everybody pays attention to this and lets it motivate them so we can get rid of this insanity from our government and from our country.
Yeah, I mean, her lawyer said this law might actually cause her to lose the ability to have more children. It's shocking and would be a genuine miscarriage of justice. She wrote, I do not want to continue the pain and suffering that has plagued this pregnancy, continue to put my body or my mental health through the risk of continuing this pregnancy. I do not want my baby to arrive in this world only to watch her suffer. Yeah, I mean, the fact that this story starts, a Texas judge granted a pregnant woman permission to obtain an abortion I mean, this is a medical emergency. It's a medical crisis. And I was saying, Glenn, we're playing Russian roulette with women's lives. Like how close do they have to get to bleeding out or dying before they can get medical care? I mean, I imagine even you are shocked we're having this conversation in 2023.
Look, we have a Supreme Court that revoked women's constitutional privacy rights to make their own reproductive health decisions. That is where we are, and we have to acknowledge it, and we have to contend with it. But listen, I am not going to preach to the women, because I can't imagine the women aren't inspired to go to the polls and put a stop to this insanity. I'd like to preach to the men, because the men should be just as incensed. And, people might say, well, men don't really have a dog in the fight. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
If you're a man who has a mother, and you probably have a mother or had a mother or
Right.
a daughter or a loved one or a spouse, or, you do have a dog in this fight.
Yeah.
Do you want your loved one, your family member, subjected to basically a government official making these decisions for you and declaring you will carry a dead fetus to term at the risk of being able to have a family in the future? Again, it's effing insanity.
And Glenn, I made the larger point, which I know resonates with you, is this is once again just proving they're a party that doesn't believe in the rule of law.
No.
Ken Paxton's like, nope, not going to pay attention to what this judge says. This is a preview of what a Trump 2 administration would be. I mean, you said it, why Chutkan's ruling was significant. You said, for the first time in our nation's history, a federal judge has ruled that a president is not above the law and does not have immunity against being prosecuted for his crimes. I mean, that was huge, right?
Yeah, and Judge Chutkan said, Donald Trump is not asking for a fair opportunity to defend against his alleged crimes. He's asking to be given a get-out-of-jail-free pass for all of the crimes he obviously committed. Think about it, Steph. If our government was to say a president is a king and above the law and can never be prosecuted, that person could literally be a dictator on day one and get away with it. Oh, wait, I think that's what Donald Trump just promised he would be, a dictator on day one. He could line up his political opponents and shoot them through the head with impunity.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Let's talk about the Jack Smith filing. You said Jack Smith reveals in court filing new evidence incriminating Trump. A Trump co-conspirator initiates a riot in Detroit to stop the vote count when Biden begins pulling into the lead. This co-conspirator statement is directly, sharply incriminating of Donald J. Trump. Let's talk about what happened in Jack Smith land this week.
Let me unpack that. That was buried in the middle of a 9-page new court filing by Jack Smith, and it's so important, but you need to know the rules of evidence in order to recognize its importance. There was a revelation in that court filing that essentially two Trump co-conspirators, he only called one of them a co-conspirator. He called him a Trump campaign employee and a Trump lawyer who had feet on the ground out in Detroit during the election efforts. And they were texting back and forth when it looked like the Michigan election was trending for Joe Biden. The Trump co-conspirator and the Trump lawyer texted back and forth, looks like we need to get a riot started here to delay the count. That I'm teasing out what they said. They didn't use those exact words, but that's where they were communicating. The reason it's so important, Steph, those statements, people might say that wasn't Donald Trump talking. Yes, it was, because co-conspirator statements that are made during the course of and in furtherance of the conspiracy are admissible against all of the co-conspirators. So when Jack Smith said one of the people texting that was a Trump co-conspirator, that means those statements are admissible at trial against Donald Trump. That kind of evidence is devastating.
This is the one that made me happy clappy. You tweeted, given the reach of co-conspirator liability and the miscibility of co-conspirator statements against all members of the conspiracy, once in trial, Trump won't know what hit him. Convictions are coming because #justice matters. If I forgot that last part, it's right behind you in giant letters. But, this is why he's obviously frantically trying to make sure this trial never happens, because this is the one everyone from you to Chris Christie are saying he is going to be convicted in the spring.
He is, because, once you apply the rule of evidence to everything that we have learned, all of Donald Trump's BS about fill in the blank, magically or telepathically declassifying documents and blah, blah, blah. None of that is admissible in court. And Donald Trump may or may not know that, but every single confession he's ever uttered is admissible against him because it's what the rules of evidence call a statement of a party opponent. So this will be a very lopsided affair once you apply the rules of evidence. And that's why I say Donald Trump will be convicted. I'll bet the full buck on it. That's my betting limit. But the challenge for us, Steph, is getting him to trial, because we just had an alarming assertion by his attorneys that basically, we think we're going to decide all legal issues on our own and we may not follow court orders anymore.
Yeah.
That is them testing the waters about whether they can ignore the judiciary. Spoiler alert, they can't.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Fani Willis, because I love her. But you recently said, we're forever talking about we need to prove Donald Trump's criminal intent. I only wish I had 1/100th of the amount of evidence in the cases I've prosecuted of criminal intent. You were commenting on the report that Pence is on Georgia prosecutors' witness list. I love this story that Trump lawyers put on notice by Fani Willis in a fiery private email exchange. I mean, she ain't playing, as you like to say, right?
No, and I was so glad. I was not surprised, but I was glad to see Mike Pence pop up on the prosecution witness list as a witness down in Georgia that will be called by Fani Willis and her team. And the reason that's so important is because we are forever talking about, oh, my goodness, we have to prove Donald Trump's criminal intent. It's so hard to do. No, it's not. No, it's not. Mike Pence will testify that when he said, look, Mr. President, I'm not joining your corrupt scheme. I'm not going to walk into the Capitol on January 6th and refuse to certify the vote, at which point Donald Trump said to him, Mike, you know what your problem is? You're too honest. That gives us a direct look into Donald Trump's mind. Not be close one eye in case you're, worried about going blind. But it gives us a direct look into Donald Trump's mind. And he knew, he was announcing with those words that what he was urging Mike Pence to do required dishonesty. That is what we call criminal intent.
Other than talking to you every week, this paragraph made me the happiest. In a series of private emails between Fani Willis and attorneys for Trump, the Georgia prosecutor assured the former president's legal team that she expects to put their client in prison despite their best efforts. One exchange, Willis wrote to Trump's lawyers, "We have a long road ahead. Long after these folks are in jail, we will still be practicing law." The exchange reaffirms Willis has no intention of working out a plea bargain in Trump's racketeering trial. Willis has, by the way, Hugo Lowell, who you know on MSNBC, said Willis has evidence, quote, the federal D.C. indictments did not have. Willis was responding to accusations made by the Trump team about her professionalism, and she said, "No one placed me here. I have assumed this title, and I've earned this title. Excuse me. I've never practiced law by hiding the ball. I've always enjoyed beating folks by making sure they have the entire file." So, wow. What does that mean that she has evidence that the federal D.C. indictment does not have? According to Hugo.
Well, I mean, in many ways, the scope of her prosecution is much broader than the scope of the Trump. You know, in D.C., Trump is the only one indicted. In Georgia, 19 criminals, co-conspirators are indicted. 4 have already pleaded guilty and flipped and agreed to cooperate. And, you know, she did an investigation that included, for example, fake electors in other states. So it is a very broad, sweeping case, and we don't know everything she has because it hasn't been disclosed to us. But I take, you know, they're kind of sending the signal to her, why don't you just sit down and be quiet? And she's like, no, not only will I not sit down and be quiet, I will send your client to prison and I will be practicing law long after that.
Bam.
That is what we want from a prosecutor, without fear, without favor, 100 miles an hour in the direction of accountability and justice.
Yeah.
That is Fani Willis.
Here's another Justice is Coming headline. Ex-police chief who spread January 6th conspiracy theory sentenced to 11 years in Capitol riot case. Yay. Former California police chief who called for the execution of Donald Trump's political enemies joined the U.S. Capitol attack and then spread conspiracies about that January 6th. 11 years in federal prison. Good. Right. That's what needs to keep happening.
Yes.
Speaking of the politicization of the Justice Department, can we talk about this Hunter Biden being hit with new charges? I'm sorry, Glenn, but to me, if you want to smell what an actual witch hunt smells like, this is it. I mean, no one's ever prosecuted, as you've told us, on these gun charges, on taxes that you've already paid back. So he was hit with 9 new tax-related federal charges yesterday. Charges were brought by special counsel David Weiss, who indicted Biden in September on 3 gun charges. The case has been given to Trump-appointed judge Mark Scarsi. Oh, my God. Here we go, right? Where, it's like whack-a-mole going, are you going to get a Judge Cannon or, But what can you give me your take on this whole thing?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts about it. First of all, Hunter Biden tried to overturn our democracy, so we need to go after him hard. Oh, wait a minute. That's not Hunter Biden, is it? Here's the thing. I am of two minds because, look, I'm a career prosecutor, former career prosecutor, Steph. If he committed buku tax crimes in violation of our tax laws, I'm fine with him being held accountable. But there is something called selective prosecution. And what I can tell everybody from being a career Fed is the overwhelming majority of tax cheats. You know what the federal government does? You know what the IRS does? They make them pay their back taxes. They charge them fines, penalties, and interest, and they call it a day because we can't possibly prosecute the millions of tax cheats that are out there. So this feels like disparate treatment because of somebody's last name. That's different from me saying you should be able to cheat on your taxes criminally and get away with it. Two different issues involved
and also
here.
Just the breathtaking hypocrisy of this party. They do everything they can to help, the rich tax cheats get away with it. I mean, this is a party that, doesn't want people to pay their taxes and wants everyone to have a gun. And
but the Republicans say you have to be a rich Republican tax cheat to get away with it.
Yeah, exactly.